It is Friday, May 10th, 2019. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was a very fun get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Friday. I certainly did get my ass kicked just a little bit. But it was really interesting because the worm finally turned for one of my teammates. Yeah, I guess that's the word for it. Anyway, he and I have been having this thing where I give him like a tip or two, and then he'll turn around and he'll apply it on me. I don't know what it is. It's like, you can't have it, man. You can't have it if you're going to turn around and you're going to hit me with it. But no, it's really cool to see it actually sink in for somebody, and then for them to see the opportunity to apply it, and then and not only that, this guy actually created the opportunity to use it, which is even more impressive because it shows me that, he's innovating, he's thinking, he's putting it all together, and so like to see this guy get from where he was to where he is now, it's a hell of a transition. And I want to say it's only really happened in like the last 2 or 3 months where it seems like it's like really sunk in for him, and he's applying his pressure a lot better. And that was the thing that I was showing him last time, was that he kept ending up in this position where it's almost side control, but you have your opponent facing you, and he would have the hand on the outside of the leg, putting the pressure on, but he didn't know how to apply it from there. And I'm like, oh, well, you just go around the head. You just keep your pressure on your opponent and go around the head, and then you're in triple threat position. And I looked at him and I see this light bulb over his head. And so today, that's exactly what he did. He created the opportunity where I was facing him almost in a side control. He dropped his weight on me, and then he just circumvented all the way around my head right into that triple threat position. I was just like, oh my gosh, he just pulled that thing on me. And then of course he had to rub it in. He's like, oh yeah, that's the thing you showed me. And so today's little tip was how I tend to get him in an Americana position. And he kept saying that it was because I was so strong. And I'm like, no, it's not because I'm so strong. It's because I use my head. And he's like, what do you mean? And so I told him, I go, like, if I'm going to go for an Americana, one of the things I like to do is, like, put my hands in a position other than where it would be ideal for me to be going for the Americana. So, I'm not grabbing on the wrist, or, I'm not hooking my arm up under the elbow or anything like that. Or if I do, I'm securing a kind of like I want to say a big squeeze position, but it's not really, because you have your arm up over the head and you're kind of tucking it in with your elbow, up against your side, and I just keep the arm just feeling isolated, so I'll either have one of my arm, I'll either have my left arm under the shoulder, or I'll have my right arm under the elbow. And what I like to do is, instead of trying to sneak that arm up like I'm going for the underhook so I can get a back grab on the tricep and pull it to me for the pass for side control, what I like to do is I'll put my head against their forearm, and I'll get it about just a little bit down towards the elbow, and then I'll just turn my head to my right and let the elbow slip up over my head, and then I'll grab their wrist and reach through Americana all day long. And so I showed him that, and I'm just waiting now that he's gonna pull that on me. I mean, because the way I do it, I keep a lot of my weight on my opponent, so the ability to roll up and defend that arm really isn't there. And especially if I manage to staple down the other arm with one of my legs, which is like one of the things I like to do, instead of just keeping my knee up under the armpit or even next to the head. I really like to have one of those arms stapled down for that. So, as far as what we covered in class today, it was, I guess it was combat guard, or combat position, I keep wanting to say. It's kind of a pass to the open guard. And we covered a couple of them, and the one I really, really liked that I need to work extensively, because I do like it quite a bit, is the setup is to try and push one of the thighs down to the ground and then pass the knee over it, right? Well, the second one we covered is similar, only you hold the knee close to your chest with the 1 foot over your shoulder, right? And then instead of taking your knee and putting it over the left leg and stapling it down that way, you hook it over towards the right. And I think I need to mess with it a little bit, but it works around to a really, really neat knee lock, or leg lock rather. Yeah, I don't know. It's painful, and you tap. That's what happens. But anyway, I really liked that one because there was a couple of adjustments I made to it. One of them didn't work out quite right, but the adjustment that I made to it was I didn't want to crush my opponent's nuts, by putting my shin directly on them. And so I pushed down on the leg first, and then kind of based out, and then guided my shin directly across the thigh, and went on from there. I really like that one a lot. But I'm having a lot of trouble getting out from under my opponents these days, and especially the one that I was talking about earlier, where he was able to maintain a really dominant position, although he went for the arm bar, and I reversed it, meaning I managed to keep him from getting me in the arm bar. And it was funny because it was from the position that I told him about, to get around to the triple threat. He took it to the arm bar, and I managed to get out of the arm bar. But I used the arm bar escape to get out of it. And so he was like, aha, you showed me that. And I go, yeah, but I didn't show you this. And it was how to get out. So, no, I haven't shown him that one yet. I may in the future. May. I'm not entirely sure yet. He might actually use it against me. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down into some music. And I have not picked out anything yet. It's just terrible planning on my part, but I like the spontaneity of it. So here it is. A little bit of Death Angel. Seemingly Endless Time. First Dance. Here on Coin Metal. And that was Suicidal Tendencies with Trip to the Brain. Or Trip at the Brain. Yeah, I could not figure that out. Anyway, as far as what we're going to get into today, I've got a lot on my plate. But this one, I've already discussed FinCEN a couple times on this show. But they've issued a new guidance. And I'm kind of torn between this and a representative saying that he wanted to ban crypto, which I just, that's too fucking hilarious. But anyway, I want to get into this guidance because I want to see if these guys have matured at all as far as their perspective. I don't know if we're actually going to complete it. We may. It's 30 pages, so we'll give it a try, right? Anyway, this is issued on May 9th, 2019. And I do want to make one minor adjustment before I get too deep into this yet. Just a little change of view here. Hold on one moment. Alright. And that. And there we go. Alright. And this is FinCEN Guidance, Fin 2019 G001. issued May 9th, 2019. Subject: application of FinCEN's regulations to certain business models involving convertible virtual currencies. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, is issuing an interpretive guidance to remind persons subject to the Bank Security Act how FinCEN regulations relating to money service businesses apply to certain business models involving money transmission denominated in value that substitutes for currency, specifically convertible virtual currencies. This guidance does not establish any new regulatory expectations or requirements. Rather, it consolidates current FinCEN's regulations and related administrative rulings and guidance issued since 2011, and then applies these rules and interpretations to other common business models involving CBC engaging in the same underlying patterns of activity. This guidance is intended to help financial institutions comply with their existing obligations under the BSA as they relate to current and emerging business models involving CBC by describing FinCEN's existing regulatory approach to these issues most frequently raised by industry, law enforcement, and other regulatory bodies within this evolving financial environment. In this regard, it covers only certain business models and necessarily does not address every potential combination of facts and circumstances. Thus, a person working with a business model not specifically included in this guidance may still have BSA obligations. The overall structure of this guidance is as follows. Section 1 defines certain key concepts within the context of the guidance. Although the titles or names assigned to these key concepts may coincide with terms customarily used by industry and share similar attributes, for purposes of the guidance their meaning is limited to the definition provided in the guidance. Section 2 consolidates and explains current FinCEN regulations, previous administrative rulings, and guidance involving the regulation of money transmission under the BSA. By consolidating and summarizing rules and interpretation in a single section, this guidance provides a resource to help financial institutions comply with their existing regulatory obligations under the BSA as they relate to current and emerging activities involving CBC. Section 3 summarizes the development and content of FinCEN's 2013 guidance on the application of money transmission regulations and transactions denominated in CBC. Sections 4 and 5 describe FinCEN's existing regulatory approach to current and emerging business models using patterns of activity involving CBC. This approach illustrates how FinCEN fits existing interpretation about certain activities to other activities that at first may seem unrelated, but conform to the same combination of key facts and circumstances. Finally, Section 6 contains a list of resources to which interested parties may refer for further explanation about the content of the guidance or to assist in evaluating facts and circumstances not expressly covered in this guidance. Number 1. Key concepts. The following subsection describes how FinCEN frames certain key concepts for purposes of this guidance. 1.1 Business Model. Whether a person is a money transmitter under FinCEN's regulations is a matter of facts and circumstances. Within the context of this guidance, quote, business model refers to the subset of key facts and circumstances relevant to FinCEN's determination of whether A, whether the specific person meets the definition of a particular type of financial institution, and B, what regulatory obligations are associated with specific activities performed within that business model. This guidance may refer to a pattern of activity as a business model using a title or label or name label that may coincide with the label used by industry to designate a general type of product or service. The label, however, will not determine any regulatory application. Rather, this guidance applies to any business model that fits the same key facts and circumstances described in the guidance, regardless of its label. Conversely, the regulatory interpretations in this guidance will not apply to a business model using the same label, but involving different key facts and circumstances. In addition, differences in similar business models may lead to different regulatory applications. The regulatory interpretations contained in this guidance may extend only to other business models consisting of the same key facts and circumstances as the business models described herein, whether or not we can actually apply that. Therefore, a particular regulatory interpretation may not apply to a person if their business model contains fewer, additional, or different features than those described in this guidance. Lastly, a person who is engaged in more than one type of business model at the same time may be subject to more than one type of regulatory obligation or exemption. For example, a developer or seller of either a software application or a new CVC platform may be exempt from BSA obligations associated with creating or selling the application or CVC platform, but may still have BSA obligations as a money transmitter if the seller or developer also uses the new application to engage as a business in accepting and transmitting currency, funds, or value that substitutes for currency, or uses the new platform to engage as a business in accepting and transmitting the new CVC. Likewise, an exemption may apply to a person performing a certain role in the development or sale of a software application, while a different person using the same application to accept and transmit currency, funds, or value that substitutes for currency would still be subject to BSA obligations. Oh gosh, I wonder if phthalic butyrene is licensed as an MSB. 1.2 Value that substitutes for currency. 1.2.1 Definitions. In 2011, FinCEN issued a final rule, 2011 Final Rule, or MSB Final Rule, defining a money service business as, quote, a person, wherever located doing business, whether or not on a regular basis or as an organized or licensed business concern, wholly or in substantial part within the United States, operating directly or through an agent, agency, branch, or office, who functions as, among other things, a money transmitter. FinCEN's regulations define the term money transmitter to include, quote, a person that provides money transmission services or any other person engaged in the transfer of funds. A transmitter, on the other hand, is, quote, the sender of the first transmittal order in a transmittal of funds. The term transmitter includes an originator, except where the transmitter's financial institution is a financial institution or foreign financial agency other than a bank or foreign bank. In other words, a transmitter initiates a transaction that the money transmitter actually executes. The term money transmission business services is a term to mean the acceptance of currency, funds, or other value that substitutes for currency from one person and the transmission of currency, funds, or other value that substitutes for currency to another location or person by any means. The term other value that substitutes for currency encompasses situations in which the transmission does not involve currency or funds, but instead moves something that the parties to a transaction recognize has value that is equivalent to or can substitute for currency. According to this definition, somebody using a regular wallet, a regular like Electrum wallet or something like that, could be defined as a money transmitter. It was absolute bullshit. I mean, really, I'm not a money transmitter when I open my physical wallet and take dollars out of it and hand it to somebody, even though I'm doing the same exact fucking activity that they're talking about here. So, they need to redefine their shit. FinCEN's regulation does not limit or qualify the scope of the term, quote, value that substitutes for currency. It can be created, quote, either A, specifically for the purpose of being used as a currency substitute, or B, originally for another purpose, but then repurposed to be used as currency substitute by an administrator in centralized payment systems. Okay, so that means if I have an apple tree and you're willing to accept apples as payment, I now have to get licensed as an MSB. Fucking people are pathetic. Let's see. B, originally another purpose for, but repurposed to be used as a currency substitute by an administrator. So if I use those apples to make some sort of Applejack or some shit like that, again, I'm the administrator now. Or an unincorporated organization such as a software agency in decentralized payment systems. In either case, the persons involved in the creation and subsequent distribution of value, either for the original purpose or for another purpose, may be subject to additional regulatory frameworks other than the BSA. Oh, okay, so if your kid neighbor writes a new cryptocurrency and gives it to their friends, they might have some regulatory framework. But fuck you! Just fuck you! I don't give a fuck about your guidance. You're not going to stop some fucking kid from creating his own currency and distributing it, and you're certainly not going to be able to get him to be regulatory compliant. Because he might not even be in this country. He might be somewhere else, giving it to people within this country, and you have no fucking control or knowledge of it. And so, yeah, you try to apply a framework to something you have absolutely no knowledge of. And more importantly, expect regulatory compliance. Oh, fuck you. It's not going to happen. Just trying to create fucking criminals out of non-criminals here. Anyway, continuing on. In either case, the persons involved in the creation and subsequent distribution of the value, either for original purpose or for another purpose, may be subject to additional regulatory frameworks other than the BSA that govern licensing and chartering obligations, safety and soundness regulations, minimum capital and reserve requirements, general and financial consumer and investor protection, etc. When subject to these other regulatory frameworks, the person may be exempted from MSB status, but be covered as a different type of financial institution under the FinCEN regulations. No. You can do your fishing expeditions, you can pretend like you get to rule what other people do with their hardware, but your ability to enforce is not there. It doesn't exist. And more importantly, you don't even want that level of control. Because that level of control would be catching all of the people in your own staff that are engaging in this shit just to supplement their income so they can keep a roof over their head. Anyway, continuing on. 1.2.2 Application of BSA regulations to persons exempt from MSB status engaged in transactions denominated in any type of value that substitutes for currency. The term, quote, money services business does not include A bank or foreign bank. B, a person registered with and functionally regulated or examined by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission or the U.S. Commodities Futures Trading Commission, or a foreign financial agency that engages in financial activities that, if conducted in the United States, would require the foreign financial agency to be registered with the SEC or CFTC, or C, a natural person who engages in certain identified MSB activity, i.e. dealing in foreign exchange, check cashing, issuing, or selling travelers' checks or money orders, providing prepaid access or money transmission, but does so on an infrequent basis and not for gain or profit. Okay, there we go. There it is. So if you're a developer and you're doing it not for gain or profit, and you're doing it infrequently, none of this shit applies to you, even though this is just a guidance and not actually law. Banks and persons registered with and functionally regulated or examined by the SEC, CFTC that engage in transactions denominated in value that substitutes for currency will be subject to BSA regulations according to the applicable section of 31 CFR Chapter X. So yeah, they're going to be knocking down Vitalik's door if of course he's in the United States. 1.2.3 Application of BSA regulations to persons not exempt from MSB status engaged in transactions denominated in any type of value that substitutes for currency. A person not exempt from MSB status under 31 CFR 1010.100 FF8 may be a money transmitter when the person engages in transactions covered by FinCEN's definition of money transmission, regardless of the technology employed for the transmittal of value or other type of asset the person uses as value that substitutes for currency, or whether such an asset is physical or virtual. Oh shit. So Second Life, forget about it. You're completely fucked here now. In general, persons not covered by 1010.100 FF8 2 who issue securities and futures or purchase and sell securities, commodities, and futures are outside of the scope of the BSA. However, such persons could be covered by BSA money transmission regulations under certain facts and circumstances in accordance with A, the regulatory definition of money transmitter, B, any applicable exemption from the definition, see Section 2 below, and C, regulatory interpretations such as those contained within FIN 2008 G008 and FIN 2015 R001. A. FIN 2008 G008, quote, application of the definition of money transmitter to brokers and dealers in currency and other commodities, September 10th, 2008, states that as long as a broker or dealer in real currency or other commodities accepts and transmits funds solely for the purpose of effecting a bona fide purchase or sale of a real currency or other commodities for or with a customer, such person is not acting as a money transmitter under the regulations. However, if the broker or dealer transfers funds between a customer and a third party that is not part of the currency or commodity transaction, such as transmission of funds, is no longer a fundamental element of the actual transmission necessary to execute the contract for the purchase or sale of the currency or the other commodity, and the broker or dealer becomes a money transmitter. This regulatory interpretation extends to persons intermediating on the purchase or sale of securities or futures, so not cryptocurrencies. Cool. B. FIN 2015 R001, application of FinCEN's regulations to persons issuing physical or digital negotiable certificates of ownership of precious metals. August 14th, 2015 applies a similar interpretation to digital certificates evidencing the ownership of a certain amount of a commodity. This regulatory interpretation also extends to physical or digital certificates of ownership or securities or futures contracts. Oh great, so now you're going to try and regulate the petro because it's supposedly backed by physical oil and gold in a basket of physical commodities. In the regulatory interpretations above, money transmission could involve either A, the movement of currency of legal tender to or from accounts originally set up to buy or sell commodities, securities, or futures, or B, the issuance and subsequent acceptance and transmission of a digital token that is evidenced ownership of a certain amount of a commodity, security, or futures contract. At the time of the rulings mentioned above, the commodity, security, or futures contract itself was not used to engage in money transmission primarily because such contracts were fractioned in relatively large individual amounts, not suitable for money transmission. However, if assets that other regulatory frameworks define as commodities, securities, or futures contracts were to be specifically issued or later repurposed to serve as a currency substitute, then the asset itself could be a type of value that substitutes for currency, the transfer of which could constitute money transmission. Therefore, as explained above, money transmission may occur when a person or agent or a mechanical or software agency owned or operated by such a person not exempt from MSB status. A. Uses any representation of currency of legal tender, paper money, coins, Federal Reserve banknotes, U.S. notes, funds credited to an account associated with the purchase or sale of commodities, securities, or futures contracts to engage in money transmission. B. Uses physical or digital tokens evidencing ownership of commodities, securities, or futures contracts that serve as value that substitute for currency in money transmission transactions. Or C. Issues or employs commodities, securities, or futures contracts by themselves as value that substitutes for currency in money transmission transactions. 1.3 Convertible Virtual Currency, CVC. The term virtual currency refers to a medium of exchange that can operate like currency but does not have all the attributes of a, quote, real currency as defined in 31 CFR 1010.100M, including legal tender status. CVC is a type of virtual currency that either has the equivalent value as currency or acts as a substitute for currency, and therefore a type of, quote, value that substitutes for currency. So Tether, or what do you call it, or Gemini coin. Yeah, continuing. As mentioned above, the label applied to any particular type of CVC, such as digital currency, cryptocurrency, crypto asset, digital asset, etc., is not dispositive of its regulatory treatment under the BSA. Similarly, as money transmission involves the acceptance and transmission of value that substitutes for currency by any means, transactions denominated in CVC will be subject to FinCEN regulations regardless of whether the CVC is represented by a physical or digital token, whether the type of ledger used to record the transaction is centralized or distributed, or if the type of technology utilized for the type of technology utilized for the transmission of value. 2. General application of BSA regulations to money transmission. And I'm going to pause it right there and do a quick little music break here. I want to do a little rehydration. I'll be back in a few here. But let's go ahead and throw back down into some music for the moment. And, yeah, why not? Tool, Vicarious, here on Coin Metal. And that was Wayne Static with Around the Turn. Anyway, getting back into this FinCEN guidance. I don't know how much more of this we're actually going to complete. We're up to page 7 out of 30, so we're not doing too bad for time. Anyway, let's get on back into it. This is Section 2, General Application of BSA Regulations to Money Transmission. Under the BSA, the term person means A, an individual, corporation, a partnership, trust, or estate, or joint stock company, an association, syndicate, joint venture, or other unincorporated organization or group, an Indian tribe as the term is defined in the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, and entitles cognizable as legal personalities. In general, whether a person qualifies as an MSB subject to BSA regulation depends on the person's activities and not its formal business status. Thus, whether a person is an MSB will not depend on whether a person is A, a natural person or legal entity, B, is licensed as a business by any state, C, has any employees or natural persons acting as agents, D, operates at a brick-and-mortar branch or through mechanical or software agents or agencies, or E, is a for-profit or non-profit service. At the same time, a person still qualifies as a money transmitter if that person's activities include receiving one form of value, currency, funds, prepaid value that substitutes for currency, such as CVCs, etc., from one person, and transmitting either the same or a different form of value to another person or location by any means. Similarly, a money transmitter may accept and transmit value in either order. That is, a person is still a money transmitter under FinCEN regulations if the person transmits value first and only later accepts corresponding value for this transfer. Okay, now FinCEN has officially made all retail commerce into something that the initiator of the payment is a money transmitter. That's literally what this says. I can argue that in a court of law. Even though I'm not a lawyer, I can derive that fucking meaning out of it. Likewise, a person may be a money transmitter when operating either on a transactional basis or on an account basis. A transactional basis includes one-off transactions where there is no expectation that the money transmitter will establish an ongoing relationship with the transactor, and the money transmitter retains the currency, funds, or other value that substitutes for currency only for the time required to effect the transmission. Aha! Possession! That's the difference. Somebody was dueling with me on Twitter over minors being somehow a fiduciary or some shit like that. And the difference is the retention of funds. If there is a period where your funds are retained by an individual, it's different from mining. It doesn't actually work that way for mining. Anyway, continuing on. By contrast, an account basis includes circumstances where the transactor is an established customer of the money transmitter, as defined in 31 CFR 1010.100p, and the money transmitter may maintain an account for the transactor to store funds or value that substitutes for currency, from which the transactor can instruct the money transmitter to transfer them in whole or in part. Finally, a person will qualify as a money transmitter if that person accepts value with the intent of transmitting it only under certain conditions. For example, if a person operates a platform that facilitates the conditional exchange of value between two parties, such as an exchange of CVC against currency only when upon agreed upon rate and amount is met, such person will be engaged in money transmission every time the conditions, such as the exchange rate and amount, are met, and the person completes the reciprocal transfers. Okay, so now credit card companies, if they weren't already money transmitters, they are now money transmitters according to this. Oh, and there were annotations in there. Number 20. For amendment to the Bank Secrecy Act regulations relating to record keeping of funds transfers and transmittal of funds by financial institutions. That's not us. Continuing. As discussed above, whether a person is a money transmitter depends on the facts and circumstances of a given case. Meaning, if they want it to mean it. That's it. That's what's going to define it. FinCEN regulations, however, specifies certain activities are excluded from the definition of money transmitter. Specifically, a person is not a money transmitter if that person only A. provides delivery, communication, or network access services used by a money transmitter to support money transmission services. So minors, you're exempt. B. acts as a payment processor to facilitate the purchase of or payment of a bill for a good or service through a clearance and settlement system by agreement with the creditor or seller. Okay, so my idea for an e-commerce website is good. C. operates a clearance and settlement system or otherwise acts as an intermediary solely between BSA regulated institutions. Oh, okay, so people running the SWIFT network, yeah, they're exempt too. D. physically transports currency or other monetary instruments or other commercial paper or other value that substitutes for currency as a person primarily engaged in such business, such as an armored car, from one person to the same person at another location, or to an account belonging to the same person at a financial institution, provided that the person engaged in physical transportation has no more than a custodial interest in the currency. Then they have to be registered as custodians. Other monetary instruments or commercial paper or other value at any time during the transportation. Oop, went a little too far, I think. Outside the scope of... No, yeah, maybe. Oh no, this is section 1. I don't know how I got lost on here. EAAAC, general applications, money transmission. Finally, the person will qualify as well, accepts value. Got that part. Aha. Here we go. E provides prepaid access as defined in 31 CFR 1010.100 FF4 or F. Accepts and transmits funds only integral to the sale of goods or the provision of services other than money transmission services by the person who is accepting and transmitting the funds. That's got an annotation on it, 22 here. Oh yeah, it just gives us a reference further. FinCEN interprets these exemptions strictly. Therefore, a person may not take advantage of a particular exemption if the activity it engages in does not conform fully to an exemption. Meaning they can make shit up on the fly and say, oh yeah, that applies to us. 2.1. BSA obligations of money transmitters. The BSA regulatory framework begins with the expectation that financial institutions will operate under a culture of compliance supported by senior leadership, including owners, board of directors, and senior executives. This culture of compliance will dictate the basic norms of behavior, knowledge, and transparency under which the management, team, employees, and service providers will be held accountable. The BSA and its implementing regulations require MSBs to develop, implement, and maintain an effective written anti-money laundering program, AML program, that is reasonably designed to prevent the MSB from being used to facilitate money laundering and the financing of terrorism activities. The AML program must, at minimum, A. Incorporate policies, procedures, and internal controls reasonably designed to assure ongoing compliance, meaning verifying customer identification, filing reports, creating and retaining records, and responding to law enforcement requests. B. Designate an individual responsible to assure day-to-day compliance with the program and BSA requirements. C. Provide training for appropriate personnel, including training in the detection of suspicious transactions. D. Provide an independent review to monitor and maintain an adequate program. The AML program must be approved by the owner of the financial institution or by the owner's representative. In the case of a corporation, such representative is the board of directors. So in other words, you have to maintain some bullshit hierarchy just to maintain the semblance of compliance. What if it's all just you? You know, in all the little spaces you just write in your own name. To assure that AML compliance, that an AML compliance program is reasonably designed to meet the requirements of the BSA, MSBs should structure their programs to be risk-based. MSBs should assess their individual exposure to the risk of money laundering, terrorism, finance, and financial crime based on the composition of customer base, the geographies served, and financial products and services offered. MSBs must properly manage customer relationships and effectively mitigate risks by implementing controls commensurate with those risks. A well-developed risk assessment is part of sound risk management and assists MSBs in identifying and providing a comprehensive analysis of their individual risk profile. As part of its risk assessment, an MSB should determine both the identity and the profile of its customers, and MSBs must know enough about their customers to be able to determine the risk level they represent to the institution. As an MSB, any non-exempt person engaged in money transmission must register with FinCEN within 180 days of starting to engage in money transmission. Cool, so you got 6 months. You can do business for 6 months and then you're kind of fucked. You gotta stop operations so that you don't run into arrears with FinCEN. Continuing. Money transmitters must also comply with the record-keeping, reporting, and transaction monitoring obligations set forth in Parts 1010 and 1022 of 31 CFR Chapter X. To the extent that any of the money transmitter's transactions constitute a transmittal of funds under FinCEN's regulation, then the money transmitter must also comply with the funds transfer rule and the funds travel rule. Additionally, as an MSB, the money transmitter must register with FinCEN within 180 days of starting to engage in money transmission. FinCEN regulations define a transmittal of funds as a series of transmittal orders and define a transmittal order as an instrument to pay, among other things, quote, a fixed or determinable amount of money. FinCEN has stated that transmittal of funds are not limited to wire transfers or electronic transfers. Examples provided in guidance are credits and debits to correspondent accounts and using a check as a transmittal order within a transmittal of funds, in which case the check and any accompanying instructions are the transmittal order affecting the transmittal of funds. Because a transmittal order involving CBC is an instruction to pay, quote, a determinable amount of money, transactions involving CBC qualify as transmittals of funds and thus may fall within the funds travel rule. Under the funds travel rule, a transmittal of funds of $3,000 or more, or its equivalent in CBC, may trigger certain requirements on a money transmitter acting as either the financial institution for the transmitter or recipient, or as an intermediary financial institution. The money transmitter must obtain or provide the required regulatory information either before or at the time of the transmittal of value, regardless of how a money transmitter sets up their system for clearing and settling transactions, including those involving CBC. In meeting this obligation, the parties to the transmittal of funds are not required to use the same system or protocol for both the actual transmission of value and the reception or transmission of the required regulatory information. As long as the obligated person provides the required regulatory information either before or at the time of the transmittal of value, if a given transmission protocol is unable to accommodate such information, the obligated person may provide such information in a message different from the transmittal order itself. Oh, cool, so you can lie. Persons interested in demonstrating whether a certain new activity or variation on an existing activity may subject them to FinCEN regulatory requirements, or that find that FinCEN published regulation or guidance does not clearly reflect their business model, have several options for obtaining preliminary, general guidance, or definitive regulatory interpretation. So yeah, you provide them with your business model and they say, yep, we regulate you. You got to register with us. Give us fucking money. 3. Application of BSA regulations to money transmission involving CBC. The 2011 MSB final rule made clear that persons accepting and transmitting value that substitutes for currency, such as virtual currency, are money transmitters. Persons accepting and transmitting CBC are required, like any money transmitter, to register with FinCEN as an MSB and comply with AML program record-keeping, monitoring, and reporting requirements, including the filing of SARs, suspicious activity reports, and CTRs, and I can't remember what that one is. These requirements apply equally to domestic and foreign-located CBC money transmitters doing business in whole or in substantial part within the United States, even if the foreign-located entity has no physical address in the United States. After the issuance of the 2011 so now they're going to be doing this shit. They're going to be supposedly enforcing this shit worldwide. Supposedly. After the issuance of the 2011 MSB final rule, FinCEN received questions from industry on whether the new rule applied to transactions denominated in all types of virtual currency, including, for example, virtual currency that could only be used inside video games. Such persons involved in transactions denominated in CBCs sought to register with FinCEN as either currency exchangers or prepaid access providers or sellers, rather than money transmitters. FinCEN also received questions from persons purchasing CBCs to pay for goods or services, or planning to accept CBCs in payment of goods and services sold, concerning about their potential BSA obligations. I'll save you some time. You didn't really have any, but you've probably provided them with the means to regulate you. To address these and other issues, on March 18, 2013, FinCEN issued interpretive guidance on the application of FinCEN's regulations to transactions involving the acceptance of currency or funds and the transmission of CBC, 2013 BC guidance. The 2013 BC guidance described what CBC is for purposes of FinCEN regulations, and reminded the public that persons not exempted from MSB status that accept and transmit either real currency or anything of value that substitutes for currency, including virtual currency, are covered by the definition of money transmitter. The 2013 BC guidance also identified the participants to generic CBC arrangements, including an exchanger, administrator, and user, and further clarified that exchangers and administrators generally qualify as money transmitters under the BSA, while users do not. An exchanger is a person engaged as a business in the exchange of virtual currency for real currency, funds, or other virtual currency, while an administrator is a person engaged as a business in issuing, putting into circulation, a virtual currency, and who has the authority to redeem, to withdraw from circulation, such virtual currency. A user is a, quote, a person that obtains virtual currency to purchase goods or services on the user's own behalf. And so, that would mean every single one of these stable coins, their issuers have to register as a MSB according to this interpretation of the BSA. The 2013 BC guidance explained that the method of obtaining virtual currency, earning, harvesting, mining, creating, auto-generating, manufacturing, or purchasing does not control whether a person qualifies as a user, an administrator, or an exchanger. In addition, it is confirmed that exchangers are subject to the same obligations under FinCEN regulations, regardless of whether the exchangers are directly brokering the transactions between two or more persons, or whether the exchangers are parties to the transactions using their own reserves in either CBC or real currency. In 2013, the BC guidance also discussed the appropriate regulatory treatment of administrators and exchangers under three common scenarios: brokers and dealers of e-currencies and e-precious metals, centralized CBCs, and decentralized CBCs. The 2013 BC guidance also clarified that FinCEN interprets the term another location broadly. The definition of money transmitter includes a person that accepts and transmits value that substitutes for currency from one person to another or to another location. For example, transmission to another location occurs when an exchanger selling CBC accepts real currency or its equivalent from a person and transmits the CBC equivalent of the real currency to the person's CBC account with the exchanger. This circumstance constitutes transmission to another location because it involves a transmission from a person's account at one location, ergo a user's real currency account at a bank, to the person's CBC account with the exchanger. Number 4, Section 4 rather, or subsection 4. Guidance on application of BSA regulations to common business models involving the transmission of CVC. This guidance sets forth examples of how FinCEN's money transmission regulations apply to several common business models involving transmissions in CVC. The description of each business model does not intend to reflect an industry standard or cover all varieties of products or services generally referred to by the same label, but only highlight the key facts and circumstances of a specific product or service on which FinCEN based its regulatory interpretation. 4.1. Natural persons providing CVC money transmission, P2P exchangers. FinCEN's definition of an MSB includes both natural and legal persons engaged as a business in covered activities, whether or not on a regular basis or as an organized business concern. Peer-to-peer exchangers are typically natural persons engaging in the business of buying and selling CVCs. P2P exchangers generally advertise and market their services through classified advertisements, specifically designed platform websites, online forums, other social media, and word of mouth. P2P exchangers facilitate transfers from one type of CVC to a different type of CVC, as well as exchange between CVC and other types of value, such as monetary instruments or payment products denominated in real currency. P2P exchangers may provide their services online or may arrange to meet prospective customers in person to purchase or sell CVC. Generally, once there is confirmation that the buyer has delivered or deposited the requested currency or CVC, the P2P exchanger will electronically provide the buyer with the requested CVC or other value. A natural person operating as a P2P exchanger that engages in money transmission services involving real currency or CVCs must comply with BSA regulations as a money transmitter acting as principal. This is so regardless of the regularity or formality of such transactions or the location from which the person is operating. However, a natural person engaging in such activity on an infrequent basis and not for profit or gain would be exempt from the scope of money transmission. As a money transmitter, P2P exchangers are required to comply with the BSA obligations that apply to money transmitters, including registering with FinCEN as an MSB and complying with AML programs, record-keeping and reporting requirements, including filing SARs and CTRs. 4.2 CVC wallets. CVC wallets are interfaces for storing and transferring CVCs. There are different wallet types that vary according to the technology employed, where and how the value is stored, and who controls access to the value. Current examples of different types of CVC wallets that vary by technology employed are mobile wallets, software wallets, and hardware wallets. Wallets may store value locally or store a private key that will control access to value stored on an external server. Wallets may also use multiple private keys stored in multiple locations. Wallets where user funds are controlled by third parties are called hosted wallets, whereas wallets where users control the funds are called unhosted wallets. The regulatory interpretation of the BSA obligations of persons that act as intermediaries between the owner of the value and the value itself is not technology dependent. The regulatory treatment of such intermediaries depends on 4 criteria. A. Who owns the value? B. Where the value is stored. C. Whether the owner interacts directly with the payment system where the CVC runs. And D. Whether the person acting as intermediary has total independent control over the value. The regulatory treatment of each type of CVC wallet based on these factors is described in the next subsection. And right there we're going to take a quick little music break. And that's at 4.2.1, hosted and unhosted wallet providers. That'll be our next subsection. And as far as where we're going to go, I got some Suicidal in the background, but we already played them. We haven't done that. You know, we haven't done any Slipknot yet. There's something wrong with that. Yeah, there is. So here it is, Slipknot, Psychosocial, here on Coin Metal. And that was Dope with I'm Back. Yeah, we were gonna go through the entire FinCEN thing, but it's pretty much just more of the same. Of, you know, you're a dick and you need to get licensed with us and give us money and keep track of a bunch of shit that's only gonna put your customers in danger, as opposed to do anything to protect them. Now, I've made a big deal about this on the show before. But I'd just like to note again, nowhere in any of that advisory did I see a single line dedicated to protect gathered information. No, we don't give a fuck about that. Who cares if your shit gets hacked and a bunch of people's money gets stolen? That's immaterial. All that matters is that you are gathering data on everything and you're reporting it and that you're compliant. It's fucking craziness. Anyway, this is not an attitude that's alien to just FinCEN, you know, that we need to be stamped out of existence via regulation or other means. And I got this article here. Actually, I've got a few on this particular subject, and we're probably going to go through more than one of them. This is on offthechain.substack.com. Banning Bitcoin will drive more adoption. And this is a public post and doesn't actually have the person, the individual. But I'm going by the picture on for Off the Chain, and yes, penis. So yeah, banning Bitcoin will drive more adoption. Congressman Brad Sherman wants to, quote, outlaw cryptocurrencies in the United States. He believes that the purpose of these digital currencies, quote, is to solely aid in the disempowerment of the United States and the rule of law. These comments were part of a broader statement made while trying to, quote, look for colleagues to join him in introducing a bill to outlaw cryptocurrencies purchases by American citizens so we can nip this in the bud. The material parts of his statement read, quote, an awful lot of our international power comes from the fact that the dollar is the standard unit of international finance and transactions. Clearing through the New York Fed is critical for major oil and other transactions, and it is the announced purpose of supporters of cryptocurrencies to take that power away from us, to put us in a position where the most significant sanctions we have on Iran, for example, would become irrelevant. So whether it is to disempower our foreign policy, our tax collection enforcement, or our traditional law enforcement, the purpose of cryptocurrency, the advantage it has over sovereign currency, is to solely aid in the disempowerment of the United States and the rule of law. Actually, I'll comment on that later. While many people claim that Brad Sherman doesn't know what he is talking about, I would argue that his statement highlights that the Congress knows exactly what is happening. He sees that the increased probability that we are moving to a world where non-sovereign currencies are the default, and it sounds like he is scared. Mr. Sherman realizes that the United States and other countries with major currencies will lose considerable power if they are no longer in control. While his understanding of the technology's potential is accurate, it appears that the congressman does not understand the improbability of being able to ban ownership of these decentralized digital currencies. The laws could be created, but they would be nearly impossible to enforce. Before we get into the repercussions of Mr. Sherman's statements, I want to review why a sitting congressman would want to outlaw the little $192 billion cryptocurrency market. Easy. Follow the money. Mr. Sherman is a career politician. He has served as a California congressman for the last 22 years. His largest political donors are financial services companies. Oh yeah, let's see. Top contributors: Royal Business Bank, total $16,000. Capital Group companies, another $15,400. Oh, wait a minute here. What's the first one there? Brad Sherman Representative, Top Industries, 2017-2018. Securities and Investment, $127,556 or $67. Real estate, $105,885. Top contributors 2017-2018, Royal Business Bank, $16,600. And Capital Group Companies, $15,400. But let's see what the other ones were. Northrop Grumman. Oh, so he likes war, obviously. Allied Wallet and UBS AG. Yeah, so the majority of those are financial institutions and war. Cool. Included in Mr. Sherman's top 5 donors is Allied Wallet, a payment processor for credit cards and e-commerce merchants. Without digging too much, it is easy to see why Brad Sherman's top donors are likely to be the first companies disrupted when Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are successfully adopted on a global scale. They've already been adopted on a global scale, dude. Additionally, Congressman Sherman is worried that global superpowers will have no response to Bitcoin's decentralized, immutable, non-censorable, and non-seizable advantages. He quite literally states that cryptocurrencies have an advantage over sovereign currencies, which is the first time a politician has admitted this publicly, I believe. So what does this all mean? In my opinion, this is an incredibly bullish development for Bitcoin. There are few better advertisements for the digital currency than a current politician screaming about how unfair it is that Bitcoin is better than the US dollar. Rather than hurting the Bitcoin enthusiast argument, Mr. Sherman is actually confirming its validity. The best part is that politicians aren't only going to be arguing with random crypto enthusiasts for long. They will very quickly have to defend their calls to outlaw cryptocurrencies against the Facebooks and JP Morgans of the world, who are already building their own versions of these digital currencies. If Congressman Sherman is upset that Bitcoin could hurt the prospects of the US dollar, wait until he finds out that Facebook has the possibility of becoming a digital central bank to 2 billion people around the world. Simply, the genie is out of the bottle, and fiat currencies backed by sovereign nations are in deep trouble. I would argue that's not correct. To be clear, I don't believe that the US dollar is going anywhere in the short to medium term. This type of disruption won't happen overnight. But don't be surprised if the US dollar is significantly weakened over the next 15 to 20 years by a number of developments. Some of these could include, number 1, other superpowers like Russia and or China embracing Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, which would force the US to also embrace them or be left behind. That's already happening. Number 2, a coordinated move by numerous nation-states and private companies to move away from pricing oil in US dollars and instead pricing the commodity in Bitcoin. No, it's not that simple. Anyway, number 3, Facebook, JP Morgan, and other private companies getting hundreds of millions of people to adopt their digital currency as the currency of choice on a daily basis. Well, that's kind of correct, except ours work just as good without the bullshit. Number 4, the continued mismanagement of monetary policy by the bottom 50% of countries, leading to hyperinflation and currency blow-ups, which would eventually lead to a significant number of the world's population adopting Bitcoin as their reserve currency. That's not all that likely. And then number 5, the United States creating a self-inflicted wound by adopting modern monetary theory, which allows for abnormally large increases in printing of money and the eventual hyperinflation of the US dollar. That's already happening. The future is impossible to predict, bullshit, but I have never been more bullish on the prospects of Bitcoin. One of the most powerful people in the world, a sitting United States congressman, called for the outlawing of digital currency, and instead of seeing a negative market reaction, Bitcoin's price continued to drive higher and higher over the last 24 hours. If the United States bans Bitcoin, it will actually lead to more adoption, not less. People don't like being told what to do with their wealth, and it is obvious to anyone who takes the time to learn, Bitcoin is better than fiat currencies. And apparently this is by Pomp. Yeah. So anyway, let's see. The Off the Chain podcast has been downloaded 1 million times in 160 countries. You can listen to the latest blah, blah, blah. All right. Yeah, cool. So, this is pretty apt, although there's some discontinuities, I think, anyway, with the ideation behind this. For one thing, the move away from the US dollar, it began, at least mentally, previous to the existence of Bitcoin. As a matter of fact, we displaced Gaddafi specifically because he intended to go to a gold-backed currency. And the same thing with Saddam Hussein, by the way. Saddam was on the verge of doing two things that would have radically altered the power balance that the U.S. shared with them. You know, for one thing, they were intending to go to a gold-backed currency. That would have been a big move because we went away from that in I think it was 1976 or 78 or one of the two. Anyway, when we did that though, we kind of broke this promise that we had made with several Middle Eastern countries where we would honor the US dollar at a certain exchange rate, of course, or at the market exchange rate, for gold. You know, so we could do business in US dollars, but eventually if you said, hey, you know, I've got this $3 million worth of fiat currency and none of my neighbors want to take it instead of gold, so if you could just give us the $3 million worth of gold, that'd be really fucking great. And that they stopped being able to do that. They stopped being able to fulfill that request. And so we ended up in this situation where we're basically writing IOUs, and some of the Middle Eastern countries have been willing to tacitly accept these as the equivalent of some sort of volume of gold, and others have been wise to the fact that we will never, ever, ever be able to fulfill on that. And so, you know, this pressure to get away from the US dollar, it was already starting. You know, the euro, that's yet another version of the same thing. It's giving everybody a mutual monetary base that they could migrate to in the event that there was an issue with the US dollar. while maintaining some sort of hegemony control within their monetary sphere. And there were other calls too. As a matter of fact, what was that? BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Spain, I think. They were all planning to create their own EU kind of arrangement. But the EU has been, I think it's been a failure from its inception. It was never really intended to work. It was just meant to drain European countries dry and fund the UK and Germany on the back of everybody else. I kind of suspected right off the bat that it wouldn't work, only because if you examine culturally the different peoples involved in the UN, I mean not the UN, the EU, you have peoples like Greece, and then you have peoples like Austria and Germany. Now, the two have entirely different attitudes with regard to work, family structure, social structure, so on and so forth. They have different expectations of their government, different expectations of behavior at work, and so on and so forth. And so when you're trying to take these two entities and put them under the same monetary unit, you're going to find there are great disparities between the amount of actual, say, work you're getting out of Greece versus a hyper-industrialized country, say, like Germany or Austria, where they've got a significant manufacturing base that simply does not exist in Greece and other places throughout the EU region. And this is why we're seeing attempts for them to fall out of it, because it's not working for them. They're like, dude, we don't make the fucking money that would even cover the interest rate for this loan you want to extend to us, so quit fucking loaning us money. And I mean, of course, the governors and the politicians of Greece, they're more than happy to accept the money, but they know they're probably never going to fulfill on it. We know they're probably never going to fulfill on it. So why even give them the money? Why even keep up the fantasy that you can? Now, where cryptocurrencies come in is that they could have their own insular little cryptocurrency that they circulate only on Greece. But it has active live exchange rates because it's traded on global currency exchanges. And so you can get an exchange rate. And so when you go to Greece, you get the exchange rate. You transact with the vendors, the different vendors and shops and whatnot while you're there. And then you convert your money back and you bail. Now, if there's any kind of monetary activity that you're generating while they're in Greece, it's most readily experienced first in Greece. They get the primary cut. Then they get to make a call about what they want to pay out to other people and at what rate. And this will put them on a footing that they didn't experience before. You know, it's like Brad Sherman's all worried about how they're not going to be able to enforce sanctions and embargoes all across the planet. Well, you know, tough fucking titty, dude. That was coming anyway. It's just coming in the way of cryptocurrencies now. You know, it's like this article says, the world doesn't like to be told what to do, and especially if they're not under our, quote, rule. You know, they got a government of their own to listen to. They don't want to listen to you, too. And if they can avoid having to, they will. You know, they'll use fucking Dogecoin if they have to, but if it allows them to circumvent all of the embargoes that you're in, sanctions that you were trying to enforce on them, then they're going to do it. You know, it's not even a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so, but getting beyond that, whether or not it's even enforceable, that's an even really a lot bigger question. And thus far, we've seen that governments have a whole lot of trouble with that because, number one, they're built of people. And those people have already gotten involved in cryptocurrencies, either directly or their relatives or their friends or one of their campaign funders or, you know, somebody like that, somebody important to them, has already adopted cryptocurrencies as a medium of exchange and a money. And because of that, they're a lot less apt to put barriers on their own transactive activity. And the states have gotten kind of proactive and think they're going to get ahead of it and be able to get some sort of real compliance. But I can almost guarantee you there is far more illicit activity concerning cryptocurrencies and being done in cryptocurrencies within the state of New York than there is legitimate activity. Yeah. But that's not because cryptocurrencies are meant to facilitate criminal activity. That's because the NYDFS has whipped out the big-ass ban hammer and has been whacking away at people who want to start up within New York. And they made this draconian rule that they get to dictate who gets to do crypto in the state of New York. And their definitions of what their powers are and what their expectations are so broad that they can at any time determine, hey, you, over there, I know you're only making $12,000 a year, but we need more of that. So you need to get a bit license, give us $25,000 just to apply for it. We'll monitor you for 4 years and say no to you over the slightest indiscretion that that we might not even understand. It just looks just barely like some issue, and we're going to use that as a reason to reject your application, take your fucking application fee because it's non-refundable, and tell you to go fuck yourself, like we did to Bittrex, one of the oldest, most legitimate altcoin exchanges on the planet. I mean, really. If Gemini can get away with making their own fiat currency, their own fucking quote-unquote stable coin, without the NYDFS chasing them up and down the block, and yet, they won't give a fucking bit license to Bittrex, what more do you need to know that the fix is in? This is an old boys club, and we're only going to allow the relatives of former royalty from fucking Britain or wherever else in, and everybody else can just go pound sand. I mean, really, if you don't want people to treat you and refer to you like you're a mafia, quit fucking acting like it. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down into some music just for a few before we close this bad boy out. And as far as where to go, man, I got this Sepultura playing in the background, and it's pretty tasty, but it's not really where we want to go. Anyway, here it is. Corrosion of Conformity, Damned for All Time, here on Coin Metal. And that was Beastie Boys with Sabotage. And it is with that I'd like to close this episode out. We will be back again on Monday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. And watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. Not even the FinCEN. Anyways, I said we will be back again on Monday, but until then, I got one last dance for us. If the program isn't cheesing out on me, which it appears to be at the very moment. Of course, right here as I'm trying to close out. Can you believe that shit? Anyway, fortunately, technology is on our side, and we can make quick adjustments and just keep on rolling. Anyway, as far as our last dance is concerned, I'm feeling the need to get the fuck away. And so here it is. Escape from the Prison Planet by Clutch, here on Coin Metal. Y'all have an excellent weekend. Good night.